All right, we'll get started. Again, my name is John Mumm. I'm with the Interstate Stream Commission as a water planner. I will start the webinar off with a little information from the Interstate Stream Commission and water planning, and I will introduce our presenter, Dr. Dave DuBois. Next slide, please. So just again, if you haven't been on any of our past meetings, webinars, just to give you a general big picture look at what the 50-year plan is. Again, we had the Leap Ahead analysis, which is looking at climate change to 2070 on climate and water resources looking towards 2070. And that's to build a science foundation. So we have a solid foundation based on science. And from that, we want to then with the 50-year water plan, which is a separate document than the Leap Ahead, is to use that science foundation to start talking about resiliency and build a resiliency assessment where we can start engaging with New Mexicans and the boots on the ground decision makers and experts out in the field and people that deal with water on a daily basis, and talking about how resilient are we, where are we at in this situation, and then looking at the impacts and vulnerability we might have looking into the future. And from that, we want to produce adaptation strategies developed and engaging with, again, the boots on the ground experts and decision makers with the science experts to talk about how we can make these strategies and develop these strategies into recommendations, which can be about policy, operations, land management, local decision making, and makers and research. So that is the goal of the whole 50-year water plan. It's a pretty big picture, but to just give you an understanding. Next slide. And this is just to give you an idea. Coming up, again, on our website, this information is there, but in August, we're gonna have Leap Ahead in-depth webinars, and we're having about 9 or 10 of them. And then going into September, we're gonna start talking about resiliency. We're gonna have a resiliency information forum where we can talk about what is the definition, what does that mean, and where are we at, and start meeting with stakeholder groups based on sectors of use and expertise of the stakeholders, and initiate a resiliency assessment into the fall. And during that whole entire process, we are going to continue parallel tribal and Pueblo outreach and communication. Next slide. Just again, information on our website. If you need any information, it's on there. For questions and comments moving forward on the Leap Ahead analysis webinars, on the Leap Ahead analysis assessment, or on resiliency assessment processes on the 50-year water plan itself, if you want to put public input, we have an actual public input comment page. You can ask questions, you can make comments. This way it's documented, and this also is a way that we don't have everything going to one email. We do have an email that we're trying to keep that as, if you have questions, if you're lost on the website, or if you are having issues with getting invited to these events, please shoot me an email at the water planning email. Also, just some general information on the webinar. We will be recording this. It already is being recording. It will be up on our website again. It's located, in case you missed it, is the location. It's a tab on the website. You can jump on there, and it's going to be in presentations and recorded meetings. We'll have the PDF file and also the recording. And also for we have everybody muted. Once we're done with this presentation, we're going to give the public time to have questions, and there is a question spot on the webinar piece for each one of you. If you have questions, please submit them through that. And at the end, if you want to ask them live by voice, there's a raise your hand also spot. And I will, at the end of the presentation, you're all muted, but once you might want to self-mute yourself, because at the end I'll remind you that we're going to unmute everybody to allow for the raising of hand and allow Dr. DuBois to answer questions. So we'll move on to the beginning of this presentation now, and I give you Dr. Dave DuBois.
All right, I think I'm unmuted now. Yep, I think so. I will get started. And good afternoon, folks. This is Dave DuBois, the state climatologist for New Mexico, and I'm physically down in Las Cruces at NMSU. And so we're going to be talking about future climate projections. First, I want to acknowledge my co-author, Dr. Dave Gutzler at UNM, actually retired now, but Dave is also the editor and contributing author, and has actually, I just want to acknowledge he's done the heavy lifting in this section, and we did it together. So we're going to be talking about, like you're here on this first slide, the mission is assess and synthesize recent scientific literature on climate, hydrology, and impacts of these changes in New Mexico. So we're not generating new information in terms of new scientific information, but we're synthesizing and gathering and putting together what is out there, what has been published, what has been researched on those topics, and then reporting out. And then that's kind of what John mentioned is, each there's going to be a speaker on each of the topics on each chapter in the report, and talking about what did we find and what is actually in each chapter. So right now we're going to talk about the future climate projections, and there's all the other topics. So we're not going to talk about those in detail. Stay tuned. There's going to be another webinar for each of those. This afternoon we're just going to be focusing in on the climate projections. So next slide. Okay, so where are we starting from in terms of the basis for kind of our start? So we have to start with past assessments, what has been published, and what is kind of the foundation groundwork in terms of what has been done. I just started listing a few of them, and there's many references. There's going to be a list in the report. One of them is back in 2006, Watkins et al. Reported to the governor at that time to look at impacts of climate change on New Mexico's water supply and ability to manage water resources. And that's you can still download that on the web. You can just search for that and you can look at that. And then the other national reports, and the most recent one is the 4th National Climate Assessment that was published in the time frame 2017, 2018. And that's this picture here in the middle, over sort of to the left, of volume 2. There's other reports associated with that. Those are really good, that give us a basis for what's going on in the U.S. And they even there's a regional focus as well. And they've wrangled a bunch of us in the academic and government to actually write and be co-authors in that. So there's some focus and expertise that are local, meaning they know the areas much more than, say, a worldwide one. So the other ones are the IPCC. If you don't know what that is, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and we've been looking at two of the reports. The assessment report 4, which we sometimes will call the AR4. That's what the assessment report is, and that was the AR4 was back in 2008, and then the next one was AR5, assessment report number 5. That was 2013, 2014. And so those are there were some of the basis for some of the projections and the models for that we're using here in this analysis is from the AR5. And then currently the AR6, assessment report 6, is in preparation right now, and I think it's going to be, in terms of the time frame, later this year, and then following. So that's coming down the pipe, and those will be available eventually, and I'm sure there'll be announcements of that, and we'll be using those. And the last bullet here on the slide is the large body of peer-reviewed reports, research, literature, and both peer-reviewed and kind of the gray literature, meaning that these are government reports or master's thesis, things like that, and other data sets that are out there. So that's kind of this is where we're getting a lot of information, not all of it, but the bulk for this chapter on climate projections. So I just want to give another set of basis, because I know there's confusion with climate modeling and things like that. So I want to start back up a little bit before we get into details. But you've probably seen this. This is our statewide temperature and precip. The red, the top trace here is the temperature. As you can see, going from 1930 to last year, and then the bottom, the blue, is the annual precipitation statewide for New Mexico. As you can see, we saw more than 2 degree Fahrenheit increase, since the baseline, as well as we're seeing not a lot of, we've had some dry years and then some wet years, dry years in the 50s and more wet years in the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s. So there's not a lot of trend in the precip, but we are seeing this trend in I think I have a highlighter. Yeah, so the trend here is so that we're going to be talking about this upward trend in temperature, and that's going to be a big focus of what we're going to be talking about, and what are the implications of this trend, and it's in parallel with global temperatures as well. So that's kind of the basis. That's sort of the jumping off point is kind of looking at those, and then where are we going from there? So this is data, this is past, but where are we going to go from there, going out to 2070? So I just want to kind of give you a sort of a moment to understand what we're looking at in terms of the assessments as well as the scenarios. Remember, these aren't forecasts; these are scenarios. They're put together by emissions. The inputs to the models are what is the future emissions going to look like, and then they go into a model, and then they give us a scenario outcome of the climate. How does the climate respond? So we're using the IPCC future emissions and greenhouse gases, and so using their anthropogenic forcings. So the past assessments you may have seen in other reports, they call them AR3 and 4, and then the emissions were the special report on emission scenarios, SRES. That's the old one. We're using the AR5, which they're called the representative concentration pathways, or RCPs. So you'll see those. I know there's a lot of acronyms in this, so keep in mind, keep that in mind. The RCPs are the representative concentration pathways. Those are the scenarios we're looking at, and they basically looked at the different 21st century climate policies that could happen, and then they identified the number at the end of the RCP. So like 8.5 or 6 or 4.5. That is the radiative forcing at the end of the century, so that year 2100 relative to 1750. So that's what that number is, and it's in units of watts per meter squared. And so these scenarios, there's a lot into them, and they indicate things like land use changes, sector-based emissions through the end of the century. We won't go into that, but I just wanted to know that that's what's embedded into the inputs to the model. That we didn't run the models, we're using the outputs from the IPCC, what they're doing. So these are the AR5. Remember, the assessment report number 5, the RCPs, and there's several of them, and we're using the ones that are in red here. So these are in analysis. We're going to use the RCP 4.5. And that's kind of that we kind of call that the mid-range scenario, and then we use our high emission scenario. We wanted to use 2 different to compare, because we're thinking we're going to be somewhere in between. The RCP 8.5 is sort of the high emissions, and so we're going to present some of the results, at least some of the outputs of the climate projection for both of those. So and so we don't want to make too much, we don't want to confuse, so we're just going to use those 2, the mid-range and high high emissions, and that's what we're going to be seeing in this report. Okay, so in terms of the models, we're getting it from this database called CMIP5, and you may have seen this before, and it's another acronym, so keep with us. So it's the Coupled Model Intercomparison Project. That's what CMIP5 is. And basically, it's a group of models. It's a series of experiments to evaluate and compare models, and it's basically is to assess the way the climate models work, and how they assess climate feedbacks, processes, and how they work. And then they also look at paleoclimate. So they go in the past and say, how do they work for the data that we already have collected? So how do they work, and do we get biases? How do the models behave during this really dry or really wet period, so to get a sense, and then to compare them. We get all the different models, and I'll show you a list what are part of the project that we grabbed, and then make it available to the community, the scientific community. So you can, if you want to, you can go download these big files, and that's what. And then our other folks that have put together tools that you can, instead, you don't have to be a C or a Fortran programmer in order to do it. There's tools on the web you can access the data, and this is kind of on the right is kind of the visual in your mind how these models work. They're gridded models. They're both the atmosphere, the land, and ocean, and the cryosphere. The Arctic, the frozen parts, and putting all the different physical processes into the models. And so what are these models? Basically, I call them tools, and there we call them general circulation models, and they're basically physics models. They have equations inside. They govern the dynamics of the ocean, atmosphere, the vegetation, soils, and sea ice. And so they'll put in things like Newton's laws, conservation of momentum, conservation of mass, conservation of energy, and things like equation of state, looking at hydrostatic and ideal gas law, and putting together and actually not just the atmosphere, but they're calling it now Earth system models. And so, putting in the different processes like precipitation, radiation, the solar radiation, as well as the heat, the terrestrial radiation that's upwelling. As you heat something, it goes in the other direction from the sunlight, and that they call that fluxes, that basically the amount of radiation going back and forth. And then like the vegetation, basically transfers of heat, momentum, moisture, weather. Those are the kind of things that things move around like fluids. And then some of them are actually putting in like carbon cycle. They incorporated a carbon cycle in the models, their Earth system models, as well as things with their external forcing. So things that are outside of the anthropogenic, human cause, things that are volcanic, volcanic eruptions, solar variations, as the 11-year sunspot cycle, things, the aerosols in the atmosphere and clouds, and how they interact with the greenhouse gases that are both natural and man-made. And then it's put together as an Earth system. It's a nonlinear system. Essentially the equations are impossible to solve exactly. So they do things like parametrizations to make things so they can solve them. And we're not running weather models. We're not doing the exact weather models, but we're doing more of an energy, longer term, looking at radiation balance, the energy input from the sun, and then energy going released, and looking at the imbalance and the trends, and then exchanges energy between the atmosphere, the ocean, the land surface, the poles, and things like that. Those are sort of the gist of the general circulation model, the GCM. So for this work, I don't want to go any more detail than that. I just wanted to give you kind of a primer on kind of what are we using in terms of the model. And so we're using the CMIP5, and this is a project that's actually on the web. You can download the data if you want. It's called MACA, and that MACA stands for the Multivariate Adaptive Constructed Analogs, and that's basically what they call a statistically downscaled and bias corrected climate model, and we're using a 20 model ensemble from this project. And so basically it's they get the 20 global circulation models with their own. They each has its own resolution, in terms of the grid size on the world. And then they downscale. It means they increase the resolution, making it finer scale than the pixels of the original model. So we can use them in regional and local analysis, even in New Mexico, because normally if you just use the output of the climate models, you may only have a few grid cells in New Mexico. But we want to be able to resolve valleys and mountain ranges in different climate divisions in New Mexico to see where are things changing, and how do we compare the eastern plains versus the southwest deserts versus the mountains. How are we seeing the changes? So we use the downscaling to provide a higher resolution. And this MACA that we're using, it downscales to 4 kilometer grid size. That's kind of like, the picture, the camera, like you get a camera and it has pixels. For the models, they're 4 kilometers per pixel, and that's about 2.5 miles per pixel. And that's and then we use that over the whole state. So that's our resolution of the model. And then we use a ensemble model. So it's not just one of the models. We use 20 of the global circulation model as an ensemble, and to provide like an average, a median, and different variability of the models, as well as how they treat natural variability. Because each model is going to has a little specific niche, and meaning they do different things a little differently. So there's going to be variability in the model. You're going to have 20 models, you're going to have 20 different answers. So how do you put them all together as in like an ensemble? So that's what we're using. And I just wanted to show, I know there's a ton of stuff on this slide, but I just did a screenshot of the models that are in these are the 20 the models, GCMs that are in the MACA that we use. And over on the left, the blue are the model names, and then the second column is the second and third column is the organization, where country that they got the CMIP5 models. And then the next column, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth column is there's a resolution of the native global circulation model. And then don't worry about the last column, the ensemble use. But that's basically used, that these are the models that are in there that are part of the graphics that we'll show in a minute. We're not going to show individual models, but these will show the ensemble averages and the variability of these models. So it basically shows the spread of all these different models. So, okay, so as I promised, and this is right out of the report that we're putting together. And we may format the graph a little bit different, but essentially this is the output from MACA for the statewide New Mexico, and the gray is the historic annual average temperatures, and then the red are the projections. These are the annual mean temperature statewide, using right with this graph here, we're showing just the RCP 8.5. Remember, that's the higher emission scenario. And basically the bottom line of this is we're seeing an annual statewide increase in temperature about 5 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-century. And so and all the colors are represented, the range, the darker color in the middle, the line is actually the average, and then the darker color band is what we call the range. Those are the minimum maximum values of the 20 models, and then the lighter shade is the quartile range. And whenever quartiles are the 25th and 75th percentile of the values. So it kind of gives you a sense of how much a spread is there, inter model spread, as well as incorporating some variability, some natural variability that the models provide. Because some of the models, Dr. Gutzler has worked with some of these models, and like the Bureau of Reclamation has worked with some of these same models, and some of them produce hotter and drier, or hot and strengthened monsoon, things like that. And we have knowledge of those, but it's sort of, so how do they all behave? And so bottom line here, that this is kind of the bottom line one, the most important graph in terms of what we're seeing is the basis for what a lot of the report is on is the climbing temperatures throughout the state of New Mexico. On a spatial way of portraying it, the graph's nice, but looking at the statewide map. So on the left side, this is the annual average temperature. This is from if you use the 71 to 2000 time frame, and then you compute the annual average temperature, this is what the map would look like. So I mean, it sort of makes sense. You get the lower elevations, in that on the order of 60s and 70s, well, not above 70, but in the 60s, nearing 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And then as you get into the mountains, you get cooler. You're going to get some of the very high elevations on the order of 30 degree Fahrenheit mean annual temperature. And on the right is actually is part of the MACA, the change. So how much in the time frame between 2040 to 2069, how much will what areas in New Mexico change in temperature? And since there's no negatives in this legend here, it's all positive. Remember, we're seeing a rise in temperature, and we're seeing it's not equal throughout the state. So we were seeing this gradient of warmer temperatures focusing more on the northwest part of the state. So the overall change by 2070 is going to be a gradual, as you go toward the northeast, a little warmer on that end compared to a change. The change toward the northwest will be more than it is in the southeast. So that's what the 2020 model downscaled CMIP5 is showing you with the MACA downscaling. So that's this. So okay, so let's change gears a bit and let's look at precipitation. So this is annual precipitation. Remember the same kind of graph. The gray is the past, and remember these are smooth graphs, and this is also the output of the 20 model ensemble. So it's the output of the model running it in the past, and then going in the blue is the future, going out to 2070. So we're not seeing a clear trend in the projected precipitation from our 20 model ensemble. So that's what we're just reporting out what we're seeing. So that's kind of what the CMIP5 is showing for New Mexico on an annual average throughout the whole state. We're not seeing I mean, you may see just a little tiny bend in there, but basically it's statistically straight across basically. But however, in the report, we're actually talking about if we break the annual into seasons, we start to see some breakout in terms of some changes, and that's what we're going to show in this slide here. So in the seasonal precipitation, on these maps on the right. So on the upper left, there's winter, upper right is spring, upper bottom left is summer, and bottom right is fall, autumn. And so basically it's the change. And sorry, the little blurry when I put them in the PowerPoint here, but essentially it's we're seeing for the winter a little more precip in the higher elevations, and on a little bit, you can see a little bit of drying signal in the southern part of the state for winter. The big one we're seeing is spring. Well, it's big in terms of the change we're seeing, but remember, for the most of the state, particularly in the southern and in the western, and even some parts of the southern east, it's our driest time of years. But we're also, remember, we got to think about not only precip, but the temperatures are climbing. So there's implications for a less spring precip combined with hotter temperatures, which kind of it kind of points us toward a trend toward aridity, being in a drier state than it is now. A state meaning a different environment. And so going into looking at the summer, we're seeing some trend of drying out in the northeast part of the state here. That's probably our strongest, and a little wetter in the southwest. And then not much change in the fall precipitation. I you know, these are just the reporting out what the ensembles are showing. So I want to show what goes, if we're to look at individual time traces, you know, so this is you know, the end of the precip for the average for until 2070. But what if we looked at a time trace? What kind of trends would we see? And that's what this is. So let me just back up a minute. Let me go back to the first slide here. If you look on the upper left, there's two little X's. So here in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, there's a point here, and then there's another point down. That's about southwest of Deming. So we're going to do a time trace for this location and this location, and that's what the next slide is. So going here, okay, so we're looking at, on the left side is the winter and summer precip at the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. That's this one here. And on the right is the lower elevation, the Deming location. So let's look at the Sangre plot for a minute. So the top trace here is the precipitation. So this is the summer precipitation, June, July, August. And then on the bottom is the winter precipitation at the Sangre de Cristo. And each color, there's 4 models represented here on each of these. So, and I just put them here just so that I know there's a bunch of acronyms, but just keep in mind that's what we call the models, and they're like, and that's what each of the colors are, 4 different models. And basically, what we want to do is show you you know, it's not a clear, you know, obvious trend. I mean, you can see if you statistically look at it, if you do a slope analysis in looking at the statistically significance, there is, you can pick out trends, but when you look at it here, it's really hard to tell, you know, looking at, you know, trends here. And as well as in Deming, there's a lot of interannual variability. Remember, here, this goes from 2010 to 2070. So each point here is a year. And so there's, as you can see, there's the models predict some really pluvial or really wet years and some really dry years in here. And so the bottom line is there's a lot of variability, but when we look at it statistically, we can find some trends in there. But we wanted to give you an appreciation as well as seeing for yourself the climate model output on a year-to-year basis for those winter and summer, you know, for, you know, Deming here. So we just wanted to give you that, and then we have a little discussion in the report talking about the implications of this, and just giving you a sense. So what about the trends in extreme precipitation? There's going to be, I'm looking at my list here, on August 11th. I don't want to steal the thunder from Dr. Thompson, but on August 11th, we're going to have another webinar talking, focusing just on extreme precipitation. But I want to give you, we did talk about it in here, because we pulled out this figure is from the National Climate Assessment from 2017, the 4th National Climate Assessment, showing the projected change in daily extreme precipitation, the 20 years extreme precipitation for the top. This is the lower emissions, and then for the higher emissions. So we're you know, looking at both mid and late century in this graph here, but basically it's showing you the you know, the bottom line and this is from the National Climate Assessment. It's saying that the changes projected nationwide are positive, meaning there's indicative of a higher 20-year return values of maximum daily precipitation. So these are the numbers are here are percent changes. So you can see there's a lot of positive numbers, you know, throughout, like in the mid-century, even for the lower emission scenario, there's a 10% change, 10% more of these daily extreme 20-year extreme precipitation events. So, you know, I won't talk more about that, but Dr. Thompson will be giving you more information on that. So, but we did mention this in the chapter as part of our projections. Okay, another topic that's really important when we look at a changing climate is that the stress combined from the higher temperatures and say the impacts of that on the ecosystem, as well as the evaporation on water and evapotranspiration on the plant systems. So what we use a metric called potential evapotranspiration. So you're probably familiar with you're probably familiar with evaporation from a lake of water. You can see the evaporation. It depends on the vapor pressure above and around the area right above the water. But this other one includes the transpiration. Remember, in the plants, they have a little they're created so that they have little holes that they're called stomata, and basically there's gas fluxes can escape from the leaves through these little holes in the in the plant structure, and they can release water vapor, and so as well as exchange gases like CO2 and oxygen, things like that, and even air pollutants. But anyway, focusing in on the transpiration part here. So it's the potential evapotranspiration is a metric that we're using it's a measure how much water would evaporate over a large area covered with uniform vegetation, assuming that there's unlimited water available to the surface. And we know there's not unlimited water available to the surface. We're moisture limited in the Southwest here. So even though we try to pull out, but we reach a point when there's no available moisture. But we can estimate that theoretically using models and the amount, and then we can assess the impacts of a changing climate on if we did have that available water. And it's this potential evapotranspiration is important because it's a function of temperature, humidity, solar radiation, so the sunlight, and winds. So thinking about all those things in a changing climate, thinking about the crops that are out there, or native grasses, or it's when they're first greening up, when they're just germinating, they're very sensitive, and as we get more higher temperatures, winds, things are stressed, plant stress. So think about that. I think about that when I every time I bring up a ET. Sometimes we call it ET, but it's potential ET. And so anyway, so we show the potential evapotranspiration. So I didn't show it here, but the baseline, let me just put my cursor over where I'm talking. For the 1971 and 2000 period, the annual PET is as high as 76 inches in the southern deserts, and as low as 28 inches in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. So that's basically the amount of water is needed that's released. So we would have to provide that much water to achieve water balance from the amount of evaporation and evapotranspiration. If we were to get that much precip, we would achieve water balance. So that's why we're arid. We call this a semi-arid environment here in New Mexico. So that's our variability, 76 and 28 throughout New Mexico. So the map on the right shows you the higher emission scenario for the 2040 to 2069 time period, and so it basically is the change. So based off of that 76 to 28 variability, how many inches change are we going to see out toward the mid-century, toward mid to later century? So basically, it's around 3 to 9 inches more potential evapotranspiration associated with the warming. So just think through and there's going to be more discussions about this in following webinars, but I just wanted to show this is the output of the MACA. So we have this as a tool to provide as springboard to talk about what areas are getting more stress from the combined higher temperatures as well as the humidity and sunlight in terms of the elevation and the different ecosystems, ecotones, transition areas. And so we're kind of be talking about that in later chapters, but I just wanted to show that this graph here, and this is part of our report in this chapter. Associated with that, as part of the evapotranspiration, there's the soil component. So as we dry out the soils, we're also releasing water vapor. Remember, the transpiration is the plant, and then evaporation from the soils And so it occurs, so soil moisture occurs with increased potential evapotranspiration. And these maps here are from the National Climate Assessment, and based off of the high emission scenario for, that's the RCP 8.5. And so for winter, spring, summer, and fall, and we're looking at this is for the top 10 centimeters, so the top 4 inches of soil. So what's the expected, the scenario for the high emission scenario? How is it going to affect the soil moisture in the top part? So we're seeing this, wherever we see the change where it's a dark color is the most concerning area. So we're seeing in the wintertime, we're seeing this really dryness signal in New Mexico as well as spring. So and we're focusing on the Four Corners and the western side of New Mexico with here. And, remember that first map I showed, that warming of the more of the northwest is kind of that where that comes from. Less in the summer, but it's still, I mean, there's no greens in the summer. The only places where we're seeing a positive change, a wetter soil, is in Canada, for most of the seasons except for summer. And there's also a drying signal in the fall. So basically the bottom lines are, looking at soil moisture because of the combined temperature and then the evapotranspiration. Winter and spring are our concerns for soil moisture. And so it has big implications for our water, how things infiltrate, as well as the surface water flow. I mean, those are really big concerns about that. So dealing with another aspect that we were looking at is, so how does this changing temperature, that's our strongest signal we're seeing, how does that affect drought? And so we're seeing the increasing temperatures, we're seeing that they are forcing future droughts to be more severe than in the past. So we've had some very severe droughts, especially if we look at the paleo records, like the tree ring records, looking over time in New Mexico. We've got some rich history of looking at it several thousand years in the past and a few hundred years. And then we've only have like 125 or so years of instrumental records that go on. So looking at all those, we've seen some really dry periods. And then the more recent have been more wetter. But because of the higher temperatures, our future droughts are going to be more severe. And so I'm just thinking through where we mentioned in the report, and more evaporative losses on reservoirs, and just as one calculation that we've mentioned in this section is pulling this information from the Elephant Butte Reservoir calculations, which has an annual evaporation increases at a rate of about 8 inches for every 1 degree Celsius increase in annual average daily maximum temperature. So you can do some calculations based off of that by looking at the trends in temperatures. You can do how much evaporation and depth are going to occur if you increase it by 5 degrees. How many, you can do the math on your own. And then how much inflow do you get from the natural surface water? So, and sorry, I misspelled annual. So those, we give you some of these numbers to think about, and some concrete numbers that is going to impact us. And then moving on to snowpack, there's been several reports have been published, both some of the federal agencies as well as scientific literature, both in the Rio Grande and then Colorado and other areas. And and basically the same kind of result as the snowpack projected to decline substantially by 2070. And I just mentioned one of the feedback mechanisms, the aridity and land use change. We're seeing on some years wind erosion, so the aeolian processes creating dust, and that gets lofted in the air and pushed up into the mountains, where it's changing the albedo of the snowpack. And if you change the albedo, you change the energy absorption. and it's going to lead in basin wide in certain mountain ranges and early snow melt, and has implications. And so it's sort of a feedback response mechanism that goes on. And there's other ones going on that will also be mentioned in the report. And then bottom line is the surface water supplies are projected to decrease over the next half a century. And then I'll show you some more information about that in a minute. So I just pulled together, we didn't put this in a report, but I just wanted to show you the kind of a snapshot of the short time period, the last 22 years of drought in New Mexico. I was thinking about, the worst case drought is the D4, which is the darkest red color. Those were some of our highest years or warmest years, like 20, if you're looking at the 2020 and, second hottest year on record. And, we've seen some really extreme droughts. And how does that impact our surface water, groundwater, our usage? And so I just wanted to show this kind of gets us thinking about how drought impacts, and we've seen drought, in our lifetimes many times in New Mexico. And I just wanted to kind of show you kind of a snapshot on. I like to make things real, and this is just like 1 year's irrigation on Elephant Butte Reservoir. And I just picked 1 year, 2018, from April to November, basically from the buildup of the snowpack, the runoff, and then the irrigation season emptying out our reservoir. So it's starting out at over 400,000 acre feet and emptying the irrigation year at 74,000. So it's 22 to 4% capacity in this year. So just kind of that. So how will climate change, a future climate impact storage, and what are some of the decisions we'll need to make in thinking about this? I just wanted to kind of just show you, kind of tying it to visuals instead of just numbers and graphs here. But this is how it impacts us as a society and our agriculture and livelihood. So going back to the snowmelt runoff, this was part of the report. This was from one of the students at UNM under Dr. Gutzler, and basically calculated CMIP-based snowmelt runoff for the Rio Grande headwaters, and then calculating at a gauge location at the Del Norte gauge. So this is the input climate. So Dr. Gutzler had 4 different climate models. So the bottom one here is the temperature increase for the 4 different models, and then the January to June precipitation, and then as a response, the model produced the stream flow in 1,000 acre feet at the Del Norte, and then here is the snowpack, the April 1st snowpack amount, going from 20. Remember, these are all going from 2010 to 2070, and basically the bottom line is from this study is that snowpack decreases in 3 to 4 models, and this is over here. And then there's a lot of variability in runoff, with some models greater decline than others. So it's not every model produces the same, but there is a general decline in stream flow, but there's still a lot of this is kind of the latest, what we have, and there's always need for more research and work to be done, but this is one of the springboards for discussion on, so how do we use this, and what needs to be done? Are there any more studies that we need to focus in on to highlight these, and looking at models, and are these adequate, and what do we need to do to kind of help us manage our waters based off of knowing these and using these assumptions, and then going forward. And so I just wanted to kind of conclude with some, and this is basically the summary of the report, and our chapter has contributed to some of these. So this is not just from the climate change projections chapter, but for the whole. I just wanted to kind of wrap it up as a package summary. These are the bullets that we're coming up with, and there's going to be a lot more information about exactly what these are going, starting from the top. Lower stream flow recharge because of increased aridity. We talked about that. We're seeing, and the projections are showing that more interannual variability in precipitation. And we did a discussion just now on droughts are hotter, they're warmer than they are, and going to be more severe. And then some of the work that's been done that we've cataloged is, decreasing snowpack, and has implications for earlier and diminished snowmelt runoff. And then, the implications, there's going to be more webinars talking about the impacts to groundwater because of less surface water. There's going to be a great discussion about vegetative stress, and what we're seeing in the future. And we're going to be eventually talking about fires, the role of fires, and then related to that, and with flooding and sediment transport, both from fires and non-fire, and then through irreversible damage through loss of vegetation erosion, and then of course there's issues with degraded quality of surface water. So these are what we're doing in this chapter provides some of the inputs to fuel to kind of use into so how much change and variability and how much in terms of direction and drying aridity. The chapter 2 is feeding into these other chapters. So that's why we're starting off with the climate projections first, because it's used in other places. So and that's basically what I have. So I will.
Hey, Dave, thank you so
stop
much. Thanks for the presentation. We're gonna now jump to Q&A session where you can ask questions of Dr. DuBois. If I'm going to unmute the full party, please make sure you're muted. If you need to ask a question, either use the question box or raise your hand. Again, this is recorded. This will be on our website, the entire presentation. If we don't get to you on a question, again, you can go to our website again and submit that question or comment later on. So, Dr. DuBois, can you get to that question box?
Yeah.
And start with that. I'm going to unmute it. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, this one, right?
Yes. All right. Okay. I think the first one says, there is a general understanding that the moisture holding capacity of the atmosphere increases with rise in temperature, but the data for New Mexico up to 2020 doesn't show that. Can you explain? What do you project for the future as temperatures keep rising?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get on a global scale, as temperature increases, the available water in the atmosphere increases. If you look at there's a relationship that's called the Clausius-Clapeyron. It's a funny name, but it's basically a relationship between the vapor pressure and temperature of water vapor, and it basically shows you more water can be stored, is available in the atmosphere. However, you have to think of this as a dynamic system, and so you've got weather systems, you've got southwest, you got mid latitude, you've got tropical, you've got different weather patterns across the earth, and so there's energy redistribution. And so in some areas there is going to definitely be, we didn't talk about it, but outside of New Mexico, there's definitely going to be some areas that are getting a lot wetter at the end of the century, and because of the available water vapor. And then some areas are going to get drier. So there's sort of a simple response to saying that we use in the climate impacts is the wetter areas getting wetter and the drier areas getting drier. And then the drier areas are more in the mid latitudes. And there's a I don't have time to go into it, but it's more of the discussion about the the fall of the different parts of the atmosphere. There's a area where there's a low pressure setup, and those are going to get moving out and expanding, where the areas are drying, and those are mainly in the mid latitudes, both in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. And so you're right. I mean, it's definitely a valid question in terms of, well, we should be getting wetter if we're getting more, but you got to think about the entire atmosphere system and how it works, and it's not just equally distributed throughout the whole Earth. You know, a lot of that water vapor is going to be generated in the tropics, as well as some of the other farther up in the polar regions. So some of those areas are going to get a lot wetter and redistributed, as well as the energy. Remember, it's redistribution of energy and water vapor. And, you know, some of and the models are able to use, you know, based off of the motion and the physics, they're able to simulate those, and that's how we're able to assess, you know, why are we seeing, you know, drying out of this area, because yeah, it's being transported somewhere else. I hope that sort of answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you. If you want to answer the next one, you show the results from the 8.5 higher emissions model. Does that mean that you think that will be more likely than the lower emissions models?
Really, really good question. So we show the envelope of the 4.5, the RCP 4.5 and 8.5, and we're thinking, you know, those are kind of the envelope. We're going to be somewhere between there. And right now we're you know, I was just looking at some of the work that's being done to track emissions, and we started off real recent, you know, last few years, closer to the 8.5. Depending on how things go in terms of our market systems and technology, and how we convert and getting less, you know, if we're able to mitigate climate change based off of the stuff that we do, the anthropogenics, you know, we could see it, you know, change more into the lower, as opposed to the 8.5, maybe a 6. I mean, nobody really knows, but that's why we call them scenarios. You know, if we plan on, say, what's a higher end, where are we going to go for this scenario? If we plan for that, you know, we'll definitely capture what goes on for say a 6, or, you know, or something around there. I mean, we don't want to over plan, but we want to be able to know that what is it going to take to manage for that one, and then we need to really think through that. So if things don't change, this is what, and we don't use it as business as usual, but it's a higher emissions scenario. I don't use business as usual, but it's higher. But so yeah, I mean, personally, I don't think we're going to head to the 8.5, but you know, other people who are a lot smarter than I am in terms of the emissions, you know, working in that area, they you know, they're thinking other scenarios, and I think the new AR6 has some new scenarios, and I'm not privy to those, and I probably wouldn't be able to tell you about them anyway because it's not published yet, but they're considering other scenarios that are, you know, okay, what is reasonable, because, you know, every few years we come up with new scenarios, and these are based off of energy policies, population, technology changes, things like that are part of it. But I hope we don't get 8.5, because I don't want to see things change as bad as that, because those are not really, we want to avoid that in New Mexico. I mean, there's the whole world, but I mean, definitely we know what if that scenario pans out, we know what things could look like if the atmosphere and this Earth system behaves that way. So our goal is to not do that.
Thank you. On to the next one. Are there models that show the amount of water absorption in the streams and lakes, Rio Grande and Elephant Butte?
I think that's, yeah, I would say, yeah, it's not my expertise area, but I think there are going to be other speakers to talk about that. specifically with the impacts to hydrological processes and the surface and groundwater. But I mean, that's kind of the state of the art. There's a lot of research in there. I won't speculate on that, but yeah, there are models and people working on that.
Thank you. Can you talk about how the projected temperature and precipitation will impact in-stream flows and how that will be incorporated into the leap ahead analysis?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's likely going to be a lot of the discussion, with, remember, because it's a system. It's not just evaporation, but it's the what happens before the water comes down, the prior to the runoff makes a big difference. And it could be even a year before. What is the we have to treat things as systems and not isolate just one thing. So I mean, we talked about in the chapter about soil moisture, and that's going to be a critical part in our discussions. Is what is the preceding soil moisture? How is drought? What's the impact of drought in the previous, say, the monsoon time? So is there not a lot of moisture in the column? And then how much? And so we during the wintertime we store the moisture in the soil column, and that prevents more infiltration and keeps it in, the frozen part, and then it slowly gets, it melts out and allows the water to flow. I mean, that's a really simplified, extremely simplified way of thinking about it, but there's more to it than that, and it involves the ecosystems, and as well as how we manage. If we're seeing earlier runoff, how do we manage with that, and the temperatures increasing, and like this year we're expecting another La Nina, which we hope it's not going to impact us as much as other ones, but you're kind of bracing for stronger La Ninas. We don't know. I mean, the verdicts is still out on impacts of some of these shorter term oscillations on climate change, but it always makes us think about it. How has climate change has a impact on all these because of the warming temperatures, including the spring runoff and even summer runoff.
Thank you. There's a question on the Watkins 2006 report. Is it posted on the Bureau's website or ISC's website? Is that available?
I would have to follow up on that. I know I grabbed it from the OSC's website a while back, and I haven't gone there recently. So I would have to get back to you on that, where where it is. So that may be something we can post or put it somewhere.
Absolutely. If we can always attach that to documents. If you find that date, Dr. DuBois, you can send that my way and I'll put that on the website.
Yep.
So, is it possible to make any projections on groundwater mass? Naively, one would expect it to decrease. Is that the case?
Ooh, that's another really good question. Groundwater. I mean, outside of my area, I would defer to Dr. King. I know that you have to wait until August 26th to ask that, but there may be some other folks who can answer that. I could speculate, but I don't think it would be better if you waited on his response from Phil King's, what he would say about that. Sorry.
Thank you. Why was the MACA selected as the statistical downscaling method? What is the advantage or disadvantage over other methods?
Great question. Well, MACA is one of many. There's a lot of downscaled CMIP5, CMIP. There's a bunch of CMIP3 downscaled work, and what we wanted to use is something that we don't want to make us. We want to use the good science in terms of what's nothing's experimental in terms of you never tried before, never looked at, and we want to make it something that others can use and others have used Maca. I know the authors and I've talked to them about it over the years. It's not something that's new. It's been out since I think 2012, and it's uses uses a good standard statistical downscaling, bias corrected method, and it's an ensemble, and it's easy to use, and and of course it always helps to have an interface that I can grab any of the ensemble members as well as the ensemble average on a website and be able to interrogate the models, and the same some of the same model ensemble members were used in, say, the Bureau of Reclamation Pecos Basin study. They uses some of the same um, climate climate models as Maca did. So there was some we could do a connection between what we know already with something that's a sort of a we haven't used in some of the other reports. Although we've like with the Department of Health, they're also using Maca as well as other work that's done outside of New Mexico. So yeah, there could have been others that we could have used, but we wanted to choose something that works, and it does represent New Mexico well. And I think it's there's some newer ones coming out that we may want to look at in the future. There's um, with the new AR6, there's a new downscaling project, but we don't have access to it. And then there's other ones. But yeah, I mean, you could always do a shootout on downscaling, but in the end, you just need to pick one and then interrogate it and see how it looks and compare it to other published work to make sure it's not doing anything crazy. So I think it's a sufficient model to use for what we're using it for right now. And but we will always we're up for peer review, and if there's other things, tools that are out there that anybody else knows, we would be we would incorporate those ideas and at least look at them, in terms of if there's other better ones out there. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. You answered already the first part of this question, which was, can you explain your reasoning for selecting Maca downscale compilation? Then the reference you provided is about selecting appropriate downscaling techniques for wildfire applications. Also, where did you get the projections? Is there an online portal for that?
Yes, and the answer is yes for all those. Yeah, so I mean, the original, the funding that the Batzaglu and Brown 2012 the funding came originally, how they developed it was from wildfire, but I mean it's a generic statistical downscaling that could be used for any downscaling project, and there's a website. We could share that. I usually Google Maca data, and it's the very first thing that pops up in Google, and it's very well documented, and it's extremely easy to use. I mean, it has a nice Google Earth, Google Map interface you can grab, and you can download the geotiffs, the raw data, and there's actually you can actually get individual member files, annual amounts, with if you wanted to go into the gory details of that, terabytes of data if you want to do that.
Thank you. Here's another one. The first bullet on the last slide of your presentation says lower stream flow. Will your report show a quantification of that stream flow lowering, perhaps a % drop graphed against future years?
Yeah, yeah, that's one of the, I think I mean, there's been several published research on that, there on the projections of at least on the Rio Grande at like that one I showed, Del Norte, and so I think there's been other ones as well, and we're summarizing those in the chapters in probably several places, at least 2 places I know, and maybe others. And it's all in the discussion as well as the reference list. And so, but and please, if there's one we missed, let us know, and we'll include that in. I mean, I think our job is to do a synthesis of what's been out there. In order to do that, we need to know all what's been done. And I think the representative of the chapter authors is pretty good in terms of the scope and the knowledge and people who've been here for many decades. So, but we could always miss something, of course. Nobody's perfect. So if anybody sees anything that's kind of a missing, yeah, definitely send it to the team, and then we'll include it.
Yeah, go to that question and comments section on the website, and you can submit that comment if you notice it's not in there or you're wondering if it is, and we can add that. Next one, wondering about changes in precipitation variability. How long of dry periods should we be planning for, and what type of high precipitation events? This year on the Pecos is a great example of going from extraordinary dry to extremely wet quickly. Do the model results provide us insight for the future in that regard?
Ooh, yeah, another great question, and that's likely going to be one of the discussions. And I think maybe we'll be talking about that in the kind of the resiliency. I mean, because we're noticing, and both in the past data. I mean, even just this year, right? I mean, like you mentioned, there's a lot of seasonal variability as well as interannual. With some of the things like the El Nino Southern Oscillation, and then really good monsoons. But you know, we have to look at the past. Well, it sort of helps us in the future, in terms of how do we become more resilient. Say, and I mean, I don't have a number to give you in terms of how long. That's something that we can look into in terms of that. Providing that resiliency. Depends on what sector, and in terms of if is it more irrigation or surface water, and even the type of agriculture. Is we talking about irrigation in like irrigation district or more dryland farming, which have very different dynamics and expectations, of course. But I think that is a really good question, and I would actually, it would be good if you would put that into the question comment, because I think that's one of the things we probably need to focus in on. Because I mean, this chapter is mainly the kind of what is out there, what do we need, what are we looking at in terms of the future, the scenarios, and then we're going to drill down to the specifics on how it impacts economics as well as ecosystems and our processes. And that's a really good question. So I'm I'm going around that answer because I don't know. We need to really think about that as in terms of how do we plan for that.
Thank you. Are other Western states going through the same type of planning process that you show here? And are there plans to come up with a regional water use? You mentioned wetter areas versus drier areas, moving water from wetter areas to drier locations.
Yeah, I would defer that question to somebody who's been in the Interstate Stream Commission, in terms of that, looking at other states. I don't. I know there's climate action plans, there's other water plans, there's drought plans. I'm not sure how everything is kind of tied in with other states. I know that there's a lot of work on the Colorado, with Central Arizona. There's tons of work, and then it's the same way with Clark County, Southern California. I mean, I would have to. I don't know, but I'm sure there's a lot that's going on. But I'm not sure about 50-year or longer or shorter. That's a really good question.
I think other states are doing similar things. It's not the same process. This is more of a governor's initiative, this 50-year water plan with the leap ahead analysis, so it's slightly different than other Western states. On to the next one. Can you explain the difference between drought and aridification?
Yep. Yep. Well, drought, we'll always have drought, and drought are, can be caused by many things. And one of the, the more frequent one, I mean, like the La Niñas, for instance. Those can cause droughts on the order of a year, or if you just have subseasonal, you know, a month or so, then we can get things called flash droughts, which are, you can go from a really wet state, drying out, high winds, and dry things out very quickly, or when um, a green up occurs and all of a sudden you get a really hot spell, record warmth. You can cause a drought in it, so it sits in a very dry state. Whereas the term aridity is more of a state change, a longer period, which can be induced by droughts and extended droughts, or even having more frequency of droughts, or even if you have wet periods in between droughts, but the trend is worsening drought, both intensity, duration, timing. Even if they're short term, it can be, we can sort of think of it as becoming more arid, if we see a decline in storage, for instance. And we have to look. You kind of look at the indicators. Looking at, are we able to store water, surface water, or is there, if there's not a lot of groundwater withdrawal, do we see groundwater levels decline? Are we seeing snowpack changing over many years, and maybe decadal? But aridity can occur quickly. I've traveled to other places where human caused aridity has set in, and caused it to go through a state change. And a state change can be um, not only the ecosystem change, the feedbacks, but also the weather patterns. After you get a fire, the energy balance changes, the infiltration changes, the amount of water that goes into the soils, and if things don't recover, then there could be a state change. Different types of vegetation come in, the erodibility changes, and then sometimes even the climate can change on a local scale. I know I read some papers on, as the wildfire took out some of the larger vegetation, grassland came in, and it was good, but the temperatures changed over a long period of time. So it's been, and if things are managed that way, then some of those, you can see the state change because of the impact of the land cover. So it's a loaded question. There's a lot that goes into it, but it's sort of that they're different phenomena, both the droughts, but they're definitely related, and it depends on timescales and causes.
Thank you. As much of our recharge occurs along arroyo bottoms and from streams, shouldn't higher intensity events get more water to those waterways and not less?
It depends. Yeah, I mean, it would make sense. You get extreme events, but it's how what is the capacity of the transition? If it goes from point A to point B, how do you transfer that amount of water? And it's the intensity, you know, makes a big difference, in terms of the flow and the infiltration, how the time it takes to bring the water. Um, I think soil moisture plays a big role in that, and I think that I'm I'm assuming that Dr. Thompson probably will talk about this in the August 11th maybe even some of the next talk on the 5th, talking about landscape change, erosion, sediment budget, and fluvial systems. So maybe you want to hold that question until the next speaker, because I don't think I can answer really well.
Thank you. For a 50-year calibrated climate model, can the uncertainty be quantified for temperature and rainfall, or do the multiple model scenarios bracket a range of outcomes plus some uncertainty due to multiple feedback processes happening on the Earth and in its atmosphere?
Really another good question. So yeah, I mean, by using multiple models, ensembles, we get a sense in some of the models that are in the MACA represent some of the different sectors in terms of, if you think of it as like the temperature versus precip change, there's a good spectrum of the models and how they behave in there. So they don't all behave the same. We don't when we looked at things, Dr. Gutzler and I, we were plotting precip and temperature and how do they fit, where do they kind of cluster, and then we're comparing with some of the other data, other models from other studies, and we in some of them we looked at the spread both in the models and then over time, and that's why I showed those time traces early in the presentation to kind of show you the interannual variability and it kind of gives you a sense of the envelope of not only the models themselves, but the variability and the natural variability, and and then looking, just trying to pull out the climate change signal, and we sort of have to do that with statistically. So I think they do. I was reading a lot on some of the individual models that are part of, and there's a lot of work being done individually on how the models treat the natural variability, and some do better than others, I think. And so looking at like the like ENSO, and so how do they treat, and what are the different ways ENSO is these are natural processes that go on, and then so that drives how the models treat things like oceanic and thermocline depths and things like that that are all part of the many other things that are all part of the natural variability, and they have a good spread. But bottom line, I mean, we're not doing climate modeling. We're trying to pick a good spread for what we're doing for our assessment here, and I think it's both Dave and I feel that it's a good representative, you know, for New Mexico in terms of planning. The models that are in the scenario, as well as the downscaling. I think so. Yeah, there's no perfect way of doing it, but there's trade-offs, and we're picking the best that's available, because we're not trying to run our own climate models, but we're trying to pick the what makes sense and what works. And I think we'll get peer review on this, but I think and feel free to comment on it. If you know a lot about climate models, maybe there's some things that we want to look at. Some of the models like the MyRock, the Japanese model, has a certain strength of with the monsoon, as well as the Canadian ESM2. They have strengths, at making a wetter, but not so hot, whereas the MyRock is more of hotter and a stronger monsoon. But there's other models that are sort of in the middle, kind of the mainstream, median, like GFDL and GISS. So I mean, I'm getting more into the noise, into the details, but those are the kind of discussion. If somebody would like to chime in, feel free to put the comment in and kind of voice your opinion on those, and we would definitely welcome that in the both Dave and I on the report. So thanks.
Thank you. How can we quantify or confirm the drying we are recording is not just drought, but aridification, or can that only be documented retrospectively?
Yeah, there's a really good article that, I mean, this was with Overpeck and Udall paper on the Colorado, and I've recently read their paper on, looking at and basically attributing the changes in the stream flow, so the snowpack from temperature. There's a decreasing snowpack, and kind of so what do we need to look at? So what directions, and how do we analyze the changes in what we're seeing? And so I think it's still, I think there needs, one of the things we still need to work on is the kind of the data gaps and process gaps. I think we could dance around all climate models all we want to, but it's more so how do we treat this as a system, and maybe there's needs to be some further work in looking at how the higher temperatures respond in specific areas, and in thinking through all the other variables that we try to do a lot, but there's always more to do, and every time we do another study, we come up with some more information and knowledge about the processes going on. So I know I didn't answer your question, but just thinking through myself on how to think through that, and maybe bring it up again the next webinar.
Sounds great. Here's another one. Slide 3 with temperature and precipitation seems to show a downward trend in precipitation over the last 40 years, 16 to 13 inches. But the gray past data on the predicted precipitation graph of slide 12 seems to show constant precipitation over approximately the same time period. Could you comment on the difference?
Well, statistically, there's not a trend downward. It may show just a tiny small, that if we were to look at it with a ruler, there is a slight change. Remember, it's the springtime is the main driver. That there was a winter and spring were the two drying in terms of precipitation, and those were the driving factors. Remember, but it was localized. It wasn't the whole state. And the graph I showed for both temperature and precip, those were statewide. So it kind of masked some of the smaller regional. And it'd be nice, actually, and that may be another one of the follow-ups, data gaps, is looking at it on a smaller basin scale, and then kind of doing some more high resolution modeling, with looking at the impacts of terrain and mountains versus valleys. And it brings up another good question thinking about it. And there are trends, but it's not statewide. It's not very significant.
Mm-hmm. Do you mind going to slide 12?
Dave? Oh, yeah. So I think it was this one, right? Was this the one?
Let me see. Slide 12.
I didn't number the slides. Is it? This is what
yeah, that's the one with the constant. Yeah.
This is where we're looking at the seasonal. The spring was showing a drying signal, less spring precipitation, and that's sort of a what I mean. But the bottom line, spring is already our driest time of year. Especially in the southern part of the state. That it's not unexpected to see zero precip on some springs. not very often, but we, to get just a tenth of precip, throughout some areas. But it's the combination of the lack of precip as well as the temperatures, hotter temperatures, and that's kind of the concern for, over time. Whenever we have droughts, it's the frequency of, and more intense droughts kind of begets more of an arid, kind of points toward a more arid state. Because if our springs from, going forward are going to be drier than they are now, what are the implications? Then that's kind of what the following chapters are about, is the, how does it impact the ecosystems, and, through the other, when you look at soils and the other hydrologic processes. And then that's when we were showing these time traces, looking at 4 models. There's a lot of interannual variability that the climate models are also showing. And that's I didn't want to go too much into detail on this, but it was just kind of to illustrate the variableness of the simulations, as well as, I mean, even if you looked at it on, even if I showed you past data, that there's a lot of variability. Picking a site in Deming, there's some years when we very little precip in the wintertime. So I hope that sort of answer your questions.
Mhm. We're going to have 2 final questions, and any further questions, please go to, again, our website. There's a comment and question location there. If you have any comments about the webinars, etc., please go there also. And there will be 2 locations in that comment input, public input place. There is one for the leap ahead assessment, which is what Dr. DuBois is talking of today, and one for the 50-year water plan. So feel free to comment on both. Here's the final 2. Talking about extremes and variability, do you think the PMPs can become more extreme or higher with temperature change?
Oh, good question. Well, I mean, we're seeing that in the, there's still research being done on that, and we just went through the PNP study. It's been like, 2 or 3 years ago. Dr. Thompson was part of that. Actually several of us in here. So why don't you ask that question to? I'm not trying to get out of the question, but I think Dr. Thompson can probably answer that a lot better than I can.
I think that's a great question for him. I agree.
Yeah.
What does a 5 to 7 degree increase in temperature mean for New Mexico in terms of water availability and the consequences for life?
Ooh, yeah. Well, that's kind of the big thing for the whole report. And so that's kind of our summary is what are the projected impacts. Our job in this webinar is to lay out what are the drivers and what are we expecting in terms of the environment. And then over the rest of the month, we're going to be talking about each one of those impacts, and then eventually we're talking about the resiliency, resiliency assessment, and then how it impacts tribes. And so I think I can't answer that yet until we really kind of go over, and we've got, the report kind of talks about that. And my last slide was sort of the kind of whets your thirst for that, kind of points in that direction. That's kind of the gist of it. So I'll wait and defer that. Ask that a question again toward the end, and then we'll be able to give you the meat. This webinar is mainly just to provide the climate, the drivers, and what goes into the next part. But thanks for that question. Appreciate that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. DuBois, for your time today and your presentation. Again, this will be it's recorded and it will be available on our website. Again, it's going to be located in the "in case you missed it" location. Any further comments and questions can be referred to our comment and question location on the website. I do believe there's one question about, are the individual chapters reports available yet? They are currently in review before they will be available for public comment. Those will be available through our website again, and it will be using the same software for comment and questions on it. When that is available, we will be announcing that when it is available. Again, everything will be available on the 50-year water plan website. Thanks for attending, and the next presentation is on Thursday at 3 p.m. and that is by it is the Landscape Change, Erosion, Sediment Budget in Fluvial Systems by Ann Tillery, and she will be doing that at 3 p.m. Mountain Time on August 5th. So see you guys then. Thank you.